Hey guys, welcome to my review of the Sony RX100 Mark 7. So finally, here I have it, the latest generation of Sony RX100. But I warn you, this time I won't be as forgiving as with the older models, since the Mark 7 is supposed to be latest and greatest. Judging by the price tag, Sony is apparently quite confident about its performance. Well, without further ado, let's put that to the test. So, no changes in external design, the camera, like every generation, remains compact despite having 24 to 200mm zoom lens this time. The body is in large part made of aluminum and it's definitely well put together. As usual, we also have a neatly hidden electronic viewfinder that's of good quality. The LCD panel is fully articulating and unlike in, for example, A6000 series cameras, it is a panel of respectable quality, providing a good sharpness, contrast and colors. Unfortunately, even though this is already 7th edition of this camera, we still didn't get any improvements in ergonomics. Whereas I could understand the lack of full grip, there is no excuse when it comes to the buttons. They are simply too small and their overall feedback is far from good. On top of that, the user interface is as complicated as in the previous generations, if not even more. Apart from some new colors in the cards and maybe some additional pages in the settings, I was not able to spot any difference compared to the 7-year-old RX100 Mark III I've tested not long ago. The interface looks basically the same. I don't really have to mention that it's not really up to today's standards when it comes to the functionality, speed and looks. That said, okay, I think you can get sort of used to mention downsides. In the end, what matters the most is the image quality, right? And I was especially curious how it compares to the much cheaper now older generations of the RX100, such as the Mark I or Mark III I've tested before. But firstly, I need to ramble about something. Looking at this picture, ask yourself, would it appeal to the average consumer? The answer is probably not. The sky is simply blown out and there is some obvious need for post-processing overall. See, today's smartphones are able to provide more appealing and sometimes also more realistic out of the camera result, so it's no mystery cameras like this are becoming a shrinking niche. Clearly, it's not the case of superior hardware in smartphones, it's all about the software related to the processing. Imagine a camera like this RX100 with iPhone's processing. And stabilization, HDR and daytime picture processing aside, imagine what night mode would look like with this kind of sensor. I'm sure it would blow us away. And even more professional users would probably in the end benefit from this too. The compact cameras market is failing at least in part artificially, not because of the smartphones but because manufacturers are not able to keep up with implementing the newest software innovations. Having said that, of course, the RX100 Mark VII still has its advantages over a smartphone camera. I talked about this a lot in my videos. In the crop you will truly appreciate something that I call depth and natural detail that's expected from a larger 1-inch sensor. Although frankly the performance seemed to be exactly on the same level as in mentioned older RX100 Mark III. At least I was not able to spot any noticeable difference. The lens is perhaps more impressive than the sensor itself. It seems to truly deserve that size signature. It appears to be consistently sharp throughout various aperture stops, f2.8 being the lowest. Zooming in on this picture, as you can see, it looks in fact pretty good. The depth of field can be shallow, but if you're looking for the bokeh, you should probably look up some of the older generations which had less reaching but a bit faster lens. The dynamic range looks to be decent. I was able to recover some of the information from the highlights and shadows in Lightroom, as you can see in those examples. Though to be expected, as I showed you before, out of the camera JPEGs sometimes come out as blown out. Unfortunately, even when shooting in auto mode. However, I'm happy to say that built-in HDR mode seems to be working noticeably faster compared to the old generation. It is useful to have, results are worth something, don't get me wrong, but still not quite as sophisticated and advanced as in smartphones, to be honest. Back to the camera's main selling point, lens. Having 24 to 200mm is definitely impressive, not only on paper. When I've used it for the first time, being used to the older generations with 24 to 70mm range, to have that reach I was like, wow. It's a feature that's really hard to beat because that sharpness provided by the Zeiss lens seemed to go flawlessly throughout the whole focal length range. What's also nice is the bokeh sometimes come out more impressive when shooting in zoom rather than in the wide angle. Just quickly look at this footage, looks sort of like from a documentary movie. Quite nice, I must admit. When it comes to the low light performance, like I said, it would also benefit from major upgrades in the processing. Just don't expect the auto mode to be particularly smart. Photos sometimes will come out blurry. Still, if you know what you're doing, the low light performance of this camera in itself is respectable. Pretty good performance up to ISO 3200 when shooting in RAW. But on the other hand, JPEGs seem to look a bit worse. I think the processing is not the best, but still with, let's say, ISO 800 or 1600, the pictures look in fact satisfying. Moving to the video quality, 4K footage oversampled from, I believe, 6K packs indeed a ton of detail and information. If I would to nitpick, maybe by default videos are a bit artificially sharpened, but I believe it's something you can play with and improve using built-in picture profiles. That said, don't get me wrong, out of the camera results is superb for this kind of device. Dynamic range could be a bit better because currently overblown sky is something you will often see, but to be fair, again, picture profiles and post-processing. I believe there is some HDR HLG setting to play with, though it is 8-bit only. Autofocus is something Sony often brags about with this model. Rightly so. It totally deserves my approval. It's both smooth and fast. You can also adjust the speed in the settings. My main critique when it comes to the video would be stabilization. Hardware-wise, it's not even a 5-axis, not to mention there is no electronic stabilization available for 4K. No excuse for that, in my opinion it should be fixed with next generation. If you're familiar with what happened in this regard with smartphones and action cameras after the introduction of GoPro's HyperSmooth, you know, it's the time that desperately calls for action from camera manufacturers. Ideally, the next generation should be equipped with 20mm starting focal length and some proper EIS to improve video, in my opinion. So, in conclusion, the Sony RX100 Mark VII, being the icon of advanced compact cameras, deserves at least some of the critique I shared with you. I think Sony needs to put more effort into research and development of future generations, because it would benefit both professional users and amateurs. They even have their own smartphone department, so really better to act now before it's too late. That said, I like this camera, it definitely has its potential both in photography and videography. Especially that impressive 24 to 200mm lens enclosed in such compact body is something very unique and I guess justifies the price in some part at least. Maybe I wouldn't mind if the camera was slightly cheaper, but yeah, the lens is quite advanced and it would probably be quite hard to fight any competition. But if you don't need that much of zoom, rather a bit faster lens, you should probably look up some of the older generations of this camera like I said. I encourage you to think about that since I wasn't able to notice any improvement in the picture quality. Not to mention you will save a lot of money this way. That would be all for this video. If you like such content, maybe consider taking a closer look at my channel. Support this little hobbyist. See you in the next one. Peace.